The DRC government has released a statement from President Joseph Kabila appealing to those participating in anti-government protests to calm down. The statement read out on the state television said the president had been deeply affected by the sad events of the past few days, which it said were influenced by the opposition. But it warned against further protests, saying the return to demonstrations or acts of intolerance cannot provide an alternative to the current talks to walk through the difficulties of organizing elections as demanded by the Constitution. The president has promised his support in bringing justice to the victims of the violence. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council has strongly condemned the violent demonstrations over a delay in election timetable in the DRC. Speaking on behalf of the UN, New Zealand's permanent representative to the UN, Gerard Van Boyman, said the Security Council strongly condemned the violence, which has already led to the death of 32 people, including 4 police officers in the capital, Kinshasa. It all started when opposition leaders called on their supporters to take to the streets and protest fears that President Joseph Kabila plans to delay the election timetable and hold on to power. Kabila's term as DR Congo's president expires in December, and he is barred by the Constitution from seeking another term. He's been in power since 2001 after his father was assassinated. He's won 2 elections since then.
Called upon all political parties, their supporters and other political actors to refrain from further violence and other provocations and to address their differences peacefully. They urged all parties to remain calm and called on the Congolese authorities to exercise maximum restraint in their response to the protests. They further called on the authorities to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, especially the right of peaceful assembly. The members of the Security Council stressed the crucial importance of peaceful, credible, inclusive, transparent and timely presidential elections in accordance with the Constitution for the stability, development and consolidation of constitutional democracy in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
The VOA's William Claus is in Kinshasa, from where he joins us now. Hi William, glad you could join us on the program.
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me.
Has the president's threat had any impact on the protests?
Well, in fact, the president hasn't really said very much at all, as is typical for Joseph Kabila, who's a famously reclusive man. He didn't actually make a statement until yesterday evening, which is more than 48 hours after the start of the violence. And in fact, it wasn't even him who made the statement. It was a reporter read his statement on the 7 o'clock news on the state TV. He expressed his condolences towards the families of the bereaved families, and he condemned the Rassemblement, which is the coalition that organized the protest that descended into violence, for perpetrating a riot and pillages. Rather, he's left the floor to his interior minister, who's accused the protest organizers of launching an insurrection against Kinshasa. And the public prosecutor has ordered police to arrest the instigators of Monday's protest. It's not yet clear whether that includes the politicians who were involved in its organizing.
William, can you give us a feel of what's going on in Kinshasa at the moment?
Well, it's more or less back to normal now. There's a few small pockets of conflict, of clashes reported throughout the city, but there hasn't been any major disorder since Tuesday afternoon, and the city seems to have returned to its hustle and bustle of normal life now.
Well, you think there hasn't really been any major violence. Does that mean that the security has been tightened?
Yes, I should have mentioned that before. There's definitely a much more visible presence of not just policemen on the streets, but also soldiers, in particular members of the Republican Guard, which is, I suppose, it's the president's military force.
Oh, has there been any word from the opposition leaders concerning how violent the protests have been?
Yes. So the Rassemblement, the coalition that organised the protest, is made up of two main platforms. One is the UDPS, which is the biggest opposition party, and the other is the G7, which is a group of 7 opposition parties. They've released statements that, interestingly enough and slightly strangely, have very different numbers of alleged death tolls. The UDPS say that more than 100 people were killed by the security forces over the 2 days, whereas the G7 statement says that more than 50 people were killed during the 2 days. The UN's figure is just over 50, whereas Human Rights Watch have said a credible figure of 44. So at this point, it is unclear just how lethal the 2 days' violence were, and the number of dead is still being verified.
Well, looking at the scenario on ground now, are the people likely to back down on this protest anytime soon?
Well, as I said, there's not been any sort of major disorder since Tuesday afternoon. However, there have been opposition leaders who were involved in the organising of Monday's protest who have already started calling for more forms of political protest. One president of the opposition political party has tried to call out his supporters on Saturday, and others have suggested someday next week. However, these opposition leaders have been at pains to emphasize that they are calling for peaceful protest and not some of the scenes that we saw on Monday and Tuesday.
All right, thank you very much, William, for talking to us on the program. Elsewhere, attention at the UN was briefly turned to the ongoing anti-government protests in Zimbabwe, calling for President Robert Mugabe to step down. In fact, protesters took their protest to outside the UN building in New York on Wednesday. They say President Mugabe should step aside without delay and allow new leadership of a country whose political and economic implosion since 2000 is dragging down the whole of southern Africa. The 92-year-old has been in power since its independence from Britain in 1980. But right now, about 4 million people are facing a food shortage because of a worsening drought. The country is also engrossed in an economic crisis in which it's running out of cash, forcing the central bank to impose limits on imports and withdrawals from banks. And something good is happening in Kenya's Kakuma refugee camp. The Monroe Chappelle School is helping young girls who have been displaced by conflict to continue learning. UNICEF says they also face harmful and traditional practices in refugee camps, such as child marriage and female genital mutilation cutting, which often interrupt their education.
Exams are not yet over. I think we all have a paper.
It's the first day of a new term at Monroe Chappelle Secondary School in Kakuma refugee camp in northwestern Kenya. Esther Nyakong is the school's head girl. She's originally from South Sudan, but in 2008, her family settled in Kakuma on the border with South Sudan to escape conflict back home. At first, it was difficult to catch up in class, but today the 18-year-old has made progress.
Within very few weeks and very few months, I came to know Kiswahili and English, and also I began passing my exams.
According to the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, Kakuma is among the world's largest refugee settlement and is home to some 186,000 refugees. Children make up 60% of the camp population. While many girls escape war at home, they are also confronted with harmful traditional practices in refugee camps, such as child marriage and female genital mutilation.
In spite of my mom being illiterate or never gone to school, she has always told us of how school is important. She wanted better lives for us. She never wanted us to live a life that we will regret in future. So she just wanted the best for us.
Esther, her two sisters and mother continue to live in Kakuma. Her older sister, Teresa, has received a scholarship to study at a university in Kenya.
I want to be a neurosurgeon because I want to inspire several people, especially the ladies, so that they can also know that if Esther has done it, whom am I not to make it? She's a lady like me, so I want to inspire others. I want to leave a legacy.
Aid agencies say they are working on child protection programs in Kakuma to raise awareness on harmful cultural practices and on the importance of education to enable children affected by conflict build a solid foundation for their future.